everyone. This is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and happy Sunday, September 21st of 2025. Now, I'm going to jump right into this week's journaling because I have some great thoughts that I'm excited to share with you today. Now, the very first thing I wrote in my journal were two words, which are deep realizations. And I'm telling you, when I go on my walks, which I do these beautiful 5-mile walks every day, I have gotten into the habit of not listening to anything. So I don't put a podcast on, and then I don't call anybody, or if there's a business call that might come in, someone I need to talk to, I will take a phone call. But for the most part, I just tune into my inner self and my inner guidance and my inner thoughts, which if you're like me and you're a human being on this planet, you know that we constantly have thoughts going through our mind. So as I was doing, my walk on Monday morning, I started having these deep realizations. And so when I got back home, I wrote down those two words, deep realizations. And then here's what I wrote after that. The best advice comes from myself when I tune in. Get still. When I tune in and get still, the answers are always there. I think what happens to me, and I know this happens to so many people, is first of all, we jump to conclusions and we overthink everything. And rather than just pausing for a second and getting still and realizing that we can always tune in to our higher self, that piece of us that is part of all, and we can get the answers, right? So the best advice comes from myself. When I tune in and get still, the answers are always there. Personally, I think that realization applies to every single person. Every person that's alive on this planet. And there might be many people who are completely disconnected from that thought and that knowing that we have that inner guidance, right? If we just get quiet long enough to pay attention. And then the second deep realization was this: the importance of being quiet about things, about certain things. We are in an overshare society. Before you open your mouth to anyone about anything, pause. I wrote pause in great big letters and I underlined it like 10 times. What if things change? So, when you have something that might seem intense or sad or scary or crazy or something that's going on in your life, before you talk to anyone or tell anyone about anything, just pause for a second, okay? What if things change? What if you change your mind? And what if you get different info? I think that happens on a really regular basis. I'm always getting new information if I just pause. And the thing that's crazy, and I know many of you can relate to this if you've experienced this, is that when you do that, when you are quiet and you take information and you let it sit with you for a minute, you let the emotions ride out, whatever they may be, situations do change. New information does come in. And if you've taken a moment and not just spilled it all out verbally, don't you feel so good that you did that? I know for me, it's like something intense will happen, and rather than just ruminate on it or get all my emotions out in a really flashy, emotional way, if I just pause for a minute and really sit with it, it changes everything, because new information always comes in, and I might change my mind about something. So everyone wants to give you advice about it, gossip about it, and help even. Now, I'm not talking about not accepting help when you need it. This is not the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I'm not even talking about a situation where you might need advice. I think that this is an important part of being in a community, in a family, in a like-minded group of people who maybe go to church together or whatever. This is not about discounting the advice or the help that we get and we give in those situations. I'm just talking about the other stuff, okay? So everyone wants to give you advice about it, gossip about it, and help even. Situations change fast, especially now. There has never been a more important time than now to go inward. And I say this all the time, but I believe it so deeply in everything that I know as a conscious being, as a part of divine consciousness. I know that now is the most important time to tune inward, and it changes the way you can walk through the world and the energies and the things that are happening. And I think a lot of this, comes from just, thank heaven's wisdom as you get older. You never really understand that when you're young, and it sounds like, yeah, all those old people and their wisdom, right? And then you start getting pretty close to where you can really relate to that, and it's kind of incredible. So there has never been a more important time than now to go inward. Most things are not as they seem. Underline that 10 times. Think about that. Most things that are thrown at us on all of the places that the media, the social media, the things that we see, the billboards, everything, most things are not as they seem. So really absorb that, okay? If you don't have the ability, the skill to tune into your truth, your higher self by now, I was thinking, I wrote that, and then I wrote ... Like if you are someone, and if you're watching this, you're probably not someone who doesn't have the ability to tune into your higher self. But I watch people who don't have that ability or that skill. And I just feel like if it hasn't happened by now for someone, I just don't know what that looks like for them. And I think maybe being oblivious is a protective mechanism for some people. Sometimes I feel stunned that so many still don't see. And then I just feel overwhelming gratitude. And that was just kind of like, wow, okay, I can look at other people and the way they're walking through things, and I can kind of judge it or be stunned by it, or that is, if I ever get that way even for a second, it goes away very quickly. And when I had that moment where I wrote this down, and then I just feel overwhelming gratitude. Okay, so gratitude for my peace in helping my fellow humans find plant medicine. Because when I wrote that page, and the overwhelming gratitude for all of the things and all the growth and the way that I get to see the world and understand and remember who I am, it just overwhelms me with gratitude. So then it flowed into my gratitude for my peace in helping my fellow humans find plant medicine. So I ended that day with that. And then the next day I opened my journal and I looked at the last thing I wrote, which was helping my fellow humans find plant medicine. And I had these really interesting thoughts about a vision of what a world would look like if plant medicine had not been hijacked for the last 150 years. Okay, and so then I wrote some thoughts about that. So plant medicine to me is like a living memory. These are ancient, not just peacekeepers and treaty keepers and wisdom keepers and healers and teachers, but they are living memory. The seeds fall, new growth comes up. There's this huge network of mycelium underneath, the surface of the earth. Like there's such a deep wisdom. So plant medicine is like a living memory. Plants are teachers, and they are in relationship with us. I think we forget because we've been so disconnected purposefully. Obviously not everyone, but there's huge groups of people who live in big concrete jungles or cities, and many of those people are starting to connect again. And you can connect no matter where you live. But I do believe that we need to realize we are in relationship with plants and plant medicine. Plants are the oldest channels of intelligence. That's just, that kind of dropped in like, well, duh. Plants are the oldest channels of intelligence between humans and Mother Earth, okay? The last 150 years has been what feels like to me is like a partial ripping of the context. The context, the content, the context of what it means to be in relationship with Mother Earth and her plants and her plant medicine and all the things that Mother Earth gives us, right? So then I had this idea because of what I do in just with herbs and herbal supplements, and I get contacted by people on a pretty regular basis saying, hey, here's this product. How does it compare to a product that's similar of yours? And what it made me think of is this. There is an isolation in modern medicine, even with herbs and herbal supplements, where we're isolating out the compounds, okay? What happens, it's a single active molecule. So and the reason I thought about this is because I had one specific question that came in from two different people this week about what makes our turmeric different than a curcumin supplement, which we all know, not everyone knows, but curcumin is a compound that naturally occurs in the turmeric root. And when you isolate out one curcuminoid, you're leaving about 200 behind. And you're leaving out the whole of what makes this spectacular. So in an isolation area where we are right now with plant medicine, because I think that there's a lot of nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals. Of course, a lot of them are based on plants and the plant wisdom and the properties, but you can't patent Mother Nature, so you have to isolate something out. So they isolate it into a single active molecule, okay? And then we pretend that it's acting all by itself, okay? It's like, oh, this is the very best way to take curcumin, is this, without letting people know that no, it's not the best way to take curcumin. You need all the other things that make it whole. And to me, that's a narrow view. And what it does, the only thing that this does is it increases the control and the predictability. So, a company that isolates out a curcuminoid or even a beta carotene out of a carrot, there's hundreds of, a couple hundred different beta carotenes in a carrot. And if you just isolate out a beta carotene, put it into a supplement, you're not getting the whole. Now you can have control and predictability. And, I'm not saying that these are bad supplements even. I'm just giving you a comparison. So what this feels like is this is an isolation type of a view of plant medicine compared to what I would like to say is a conversation. I personally love talking to my plants. I talk to my plants even when I've harvested a root or picked holy basil leaves for tea. There's a communion, there's a conversation. So part of this is that we get to have certain rituals and dosing rituals around a conversation. The components are all working together, and there's energetic timing. I always think about the best time to say harvest roots, like astragalus root or lomatium root or any type of root, especially medicinal root. The time to do this is in the fall. It may be in the late summer or in the fall and even late into the fall. Many root medicinal herbs are at their most potent. So there is an energetic timing. And some people know that you can take a combination of something really powerful, like say a parasite cleanse that has like wormwood and black walnut hulls, green black walnut hulls, some cloves, and you can do this on a full moon because the energies are different. Okay, and it's not saying you always have to, but there's an energetic timing with plants and plant medicine, and it's traditional. This is where tradition is, okay? And what I believe that this does when we have a conversation with the plants is it actually ushers in outcomes. You get outcomes, you get results. And I think that that's what honestly all of us are after, is results, okay? And then we have two different categories. So this is a commodification, and it in a way it sometimes feels a little bit like this for me, but then I have to remind myself my mission, the side of my mission, what I do in my own herbal company, and the fact that I have not scaled this because I believe that there's so many deep beliefs about not wanting to scale something like what I do. There's so much that gets lost in a scaling situation when it comes to plant medicine and etc. So there's like a commodification, and this is completely polar opposite of nurtured knowledge, okay? So when you commodify something, what happens is knowledge then becomes property, okay? You have patents, you have proprietary like extracts and tinctures, and it's all proprietary, right? And then you have marketing claims. So when you commodify something, you can't do that unless you want to make a marketing claim, right? And what this does is this moves responsibilities and the benefits. So it takes away my responsibility of a relationship with the plant, and it commodifies it. And it takes my responsibility and gives it to the supplement maker, the doctor who prescribed it, the naturopath who prescribed. Like it actually takes away the responsibility and I believe the benefits. Okay. And what it does is it hands it over to the corporations, the supply chains, and then this one on top, which if you've had any type of legal thing or you have a company that has to have legal on staff or whatever, it puts things into legal frameworks. And to me, that's commodification. Now, here's the difference between that and nurtured knowledge. When you have nurtured knowledge, it's community driven because every community is localized, and there are just different nurtured knowledges and wisdoms that are passed down, okay? And it also puts the responsibility and the results and the benefits for all. So it puts the responsibility back on the individual and the community they belong to, and then everyone benefits. Everyone benefits, right? So here's something I actually found, okay? Plant medicines, when returned to the relational matrix, do more than heal the body. They reteach humans how to negotiate time, dependency, and care. They restore patience through seasonal cycles, responsibility through continuous tending, and humility. We are not only the keepers, okay? So we get to put our ego aside, right? In this teaching, a species that forgot reciprocity remembers it again. I found that and I was like, oh my gosh, that's perfect, right? So it's time for plant medicine to pivot. I believe that we are at that pivotal time. So then after I wrote that, I came back in the next day for my journaling. And then this is what I kind of had this bit of a daydream about what I like to call clinic gardens. So think about a clinic and a garden. And for a couple of decades, I restarted my dad's company just about 25 years ago. So I've been doing this full time for almost 25 years. And on a regular basis, I will tell people, I believe that modern medicine, modern technology, all the things that we have needs to marry plant medicine and traditional knowledge and wisdom, because we have things that can save our lives. And if you think about a perfect scenario, and I have said this so many times to so many people, I've said it on podcasts and all kinds of places, is that in a perfect world, which I see us going to this place where a person has a health issue and they walk into a space, a wellness clinic, where you have the option to get acupuncture. You might need surgery. You might need a pharmaceutical medication to get you out of a serious situation. But you might need some emotional release. You might have trauma that's causing all of your health problems. So what I did is I wrote down some really interesting thoughts on what would it look like if we had a space in every town that was like a clinic garden, okay? And both and all of the modalities exist, okay? This is what I would consider a village of living medicine. Like, even think about the way that sounds. Okay, so there we respect and we follow the seasons, okay? The spring is for planting, the summer is for feasts and community meals, autumn is for harvest and where plant medicine is stored, and then the winter is for like storytelling around the fire and preserving all the roots and all the remedies. Because in the winter we want to use all of the things that all the seasons provided for us, right? So modern medicine and knowledge has its place in this clinic garden. I see a lab with windows that will open to the garden, okay? We test things like soil quality, and you can even test the plant genetics. Like, let's look into these things. These scientific things can absolutely enhance and bring understanding to more of us in this modern world. And I think especially where we are now, where we've learned that it's good to actually get wisdom and knowledge from, say, a shaman or an indigenous medicine man. But most of us that are in the Western world don't have access to that. And we have gotten used to having things scientifically proven to us. And I think that learning about, how can we enhance the soil? It might need a little bit of rest. It might need more nutrition. These things are all good. And what I find that would be perfect in this is to share all of this info with the traditional healers. So like you have these generational knowledge keepers, and can you imagine if there was a collaboration between the modern scientists and if there was just a shared passion for living together in health and all of the stuff, right? This would also give us the ability to have a digital herbal record that everyone, even globally, can access, but it's preserved locally, okay? We can use AI gently to help. And again, I am painting in my brain, I'm painting a scenario that sounds like a place we're moving to. It will help catalog things like knowledge, different patterns, and especially stories, right? And it will help amplify the wisdom. It'll help amplify wisdom that is in so many, there's so many people, even your grandma or your great aunt or your grandpa or, whoever is in your lineage. I'm sure you can find those people, and many, many, many are still alive for many of us, that we can tap into their wisdom, okay? And here's something that I also envisioned. Each clinic garden would have a wild space, a place that just gets to grow wild. You can go there. You can go to remember and to heal. Okay, so can you imagine a beautiful, beautiful place in every town where it just gets to grow how Mother Nature grows it? And there are benches, there are places for people to sit and commune with the plants and be in Mother Nature. No technology is allowed there. And we get to go, we get to remember, and we get to heal. And to me, I think many of us not only have created that in our own spaces, but I believe that this is starting to become something that more and more people are recognizing is important, and this is how humans have been living for a long time. Okay, so then I wrote this. This sounds like fantasy, but it's not only attainable, it already exists. I talk to a lot of people, and I kind of have a pulse in my own little way of the people who have been doing this not only for decades, but especially in the last probably 20 years, and even heightened now more in the last 5 to 6 years, okay? But this is what I feel like. It's scattered, it's fragile, and it's underfunded, okay? So what if every town had one clinic garden, okay? So here's a question, and I don't have a lot of questions for you this week, but what if you don't have to wait, okay? We don't have to wait for the government, the corporations, your neighbor, whatever, to start, okay? Here's how you can do it. It can start in your backyard, it can start on your balcony, and it can start like in your neighborhood, in a community plot. If you don't have a space, or maybe you don't even, maybe you don't want to plant some stuff on your balcony, maybe you don't have a balcony, maybe you just don't live in a place where you have access. But if you just take that first step and find a place for you to actually start, we don't have to wait. We can pool our resources as neighborhoods and communities, and a lot of it might just be sweat labor. It might just be a little bit of getting out there, rolling up your sleeves, and enjoying Mother Nature for the first time for many people. A small circle of friends who decide to treat plants like a living memory, like their friends, like healers, and like family. And we just choose to remember, okay? I think that was actually really, really fun. In fact, I after I wrote that, that night, I had this really vivid dream of a space like that was part of my community, my local neighborhood community. And I was a piece of that, and it was so beautiful. And I think that if we take the first step, ask yourself, what is something that I can do that might be out of my comfort zone where I can make a difference? And I think we're encouraged to stay in our homes and watch our TV and see what's on Netflix and only socialize with, like, we need to get into the communities more, from my perspective. So that's kind of where I left it. Then, and feels like just kind of a random week of journaling, but then the next day, these things came in. So I'm just going to go through this. Let's see, we're at 26 minutes. Okay, this is good. So these messages kind of came in from my higher self as I sat in stillness. And this was over a couple of days period. Okay, so the energies feel soft to me right now. I think if we purposely put ourselves in that space, no matter what is going on in our life, because I know many, many people have very, very hard things that they're dealing with. And many people are navigating just being alive as a human being on this planet right now. So for me, the energies feel soft, okay? I am enough regardless of what is going on. I am creative and I am intelligent. So regardless of what is going on, I remind myself, I'm enough. I'm here for a finite experience. I'm creative and I'm intelligent. And I think we are so used to berating ourselves that we forget to remind ourselves, every single one of us are creative. Every single one of us, we have this deep inner wisdom and intelligence, and we just forget. And we're trained to forget. We're trained to be distracted, right? Spirit wants to give us love. And I wrote me. Spirit wants to give me love. Okay, so I know that God, the divine, the peace that I am a part of, it wants to give me love. It wants to remind me that I am love. So Spirit wants to give me love. It wants to remind me to connect with the earth. And I am an earth sign. I'm Taurus. I am earth to the core. And so connect with the earth. Give grace to your inner child. And then I wrote find joy and rediscover my joy. And I wrote that because, I've had a hard time actually since the lockdowns happened. And I've had moments of joy, but I've had mostly moments of, it's interesting to say, but I need to find my joy. And I need to enjoy being here a little bit more. I'm dedicated to what I do. I'm dedicated to the people I get to help, and I don't ever want to change that because that does bring me joy. But the things that I used to enjoy, that has probably shifted the most. There's a huge group of people that's no longer in my life. That's actually more peaceful for me and more congruent for where I am. But I think that's what I wrote. Give grace to your inner child, find joy, rediscover your joy. And then this came in, acknowledge how far you've come. This I give so much gratitude for. I look at myself in even just as recently as March of 2020 when the whole world shut down. And I was like everyone, I was like, but I could feel the fear of the entire planet too. And I did my best to snap people out of it. I was like, this is not what you think it is. And then I spiraled into fear because I could see that I felt trapped into being controlled and all of that stuff. So then I had this little prompt, and I have not done this yet, but write a letter to your past self. Because I am always about my future self and taking what I project for the future into where I am in the present, okay? So then after I wrote that, I wrote, see if it changes my present self. So I wrote that after I said, after I wrote, give grace to your inner child, because then I'm like, okay, if I write a letter to my past self, that even could be back in my childhood, and I constantly talk about the wonderful childhood I had, and I did. I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. There were hard things like everyone has, and of course, this is not something I don't ever focus on those kinds of things, but it would be interesting to actually sit down and do this, and there's a very likely chance I'll do that this week. But write a letter to your past self and see if it changes anything about your present self. Okay, that's going to be an interesting exercise for me. So then I wrote this. Drew a line, and then I wrote this. You're safe now. You're protecting yourself now, and you are strong. Okay? Remember this part of you. Rediscover yourself. Recreate a new version of yourself. I think we're always growing, always learning, always. It's so easy to get stuck in whatever, as you go to the next spiritual level, the next awakening, the next awareness, the next remembering. I think what happens is sometimes we land there, and I think it's okay to land there for a while. Stay there for a while until it gets a little bit uncomfortable. And for me, because I've just been on this ascension path, I land into this new remembering, and then I stay there for a while, and then I start to get uncomfortable because I know there's more. So remember this part of you, rediscover yourself, recreate a new version of yourself, adapt, flow, and transition, and stay expansive. Okay, I think that is super important for all of us. And that's one reason, honestly, I wanted to share all this with you, because I feel like some of these thoughts could be little nuggets of you seeing yourself in these things that kind of flowed through me this week. I need to remind myself to stay connected with the divine. I still get caught in moments of fear, and I think we all do. It's part of the human experience until we transcend that, right? So stay connected to the divine. Remember that you are divinely guided. It's a time of healing, and it's magical. This to me is one of the most important rememberings. It's a time of healing, and it is magical. And I love that this whole plant medicine with the possibility of like a clinic type of a garden coming in, like how beautiful of an idea that might seem kind of like a fantasy at the moment. How beautiful is that? That sounds magical, right? I mean, imagine if you had, you went in with some pain into this beautiful clinic garden, and they gave you a tincture of white willow bark, and after they gave you the tincture, you went down by this small little river that was flowing through, and you stood by the white willow bark tree. You stood by the willow tree while you were appreciating and utilizing on a biological level all of the benefits of it. Same with something like St. John's wort. You take an extract or a tea of St. John's wort, you go out and you simply stand by a St. John's wort plant with those beautiful yellow flowers, and I will tell you, this will lift your mood even if you didn't take a tincture or a tea made from this plant. There is an energy coming off of a St. John's wort plant that I've personally experienced, and it's beautiful, it's magical, right? So we need to, so it's a time of healing, and it's magical. If we tune into the frequencies that are tune into the frequencies that are so high right now, there is no reason to fear. And this again is underlined like 10 times I wrote. There's no reason to fear. Why do we delve into these moments of fear and lack and all of this stuff? But be careful what you fall asleep to. I wrote that because there's a couple of meditations that I love, and I put my earbuds on if I've had a stressful day. I'll go to bed with this beautiful meditation, and it's about 36 minutes. There's one that I've turned to probably 150 times in the last few years, and I love this meditation. in fact, I'll put a link to it below this video because I've shared it before a few years ago, but a couple times in the past couple weeks, I've tuned this in. But the issue is it lives on YouTube, and if I fall asleep, then a commercial starts and it wakes me up. So what I do now is I say, okay, this is 36 minutes, and I'm gonna stay present, and I'm gonna sit up so that I don't fall asleep, because it's such a beautiful piece of meditation. So that's why I wrote, be careful what you fall asleep to, but you could use this on another level of falling asleep to, maybe you have a TV in your bedroom still, and you fall asleep with the news on, or late night talk shows or whatever. I don't have a TV in my bedroom, and I don't watch TV hardly ever. I watch stuff on my computer. I'll tune into different podcasts, but be very careful what you fall asleep to, both metaphorically and in real life. Okay, and be brave enough to tap in and go for what you want. Be brave enough to tap in and go for what you want. And then I'm going to end it with this, because this is really beautiful. Pull the sun toward you. I think we're always reaching for something brighter, something sunny, or something, we're reaching for the sun, mostly metaphorically, okay? So how about if you pull the sun toward you? That way it's like, I'm going to take that energy and I am going to envision pulling all of that bright sunshine, energetic frequency of love and light and warmth and all of that. I'm going to pull that toward myself, okay? Be as busy as you want right now, but let your soul rest, okay? That is where I'm going to end this today. I don't have a list of questions. I just kind of have a little bit of random musings and deep realizations that I thought would be really fun to share with you today. So I'd love to know what you think about this. And if you are a person out there who's got and has recently started making some changes as far as connecting with Mother Nature on a level of plants on a balcony, plants in your yard, being a participant in a community garden, please let me know. I don't ever ask for thumbs up or comments or shares. I think that if people feel so inclined and they want to, pop in and make a comment, I always love to read your comments and respond to you, because I know that the people that are watching this are like-minded souls, and we're all here to not just help each other, but to recognize that there are beautiful healing frequencies that we can tune into. And this to me is a big, big cycle, that humanity is at the top of this cycle that we can participate in at a level that we can't even imagine. So thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful third week in September of 2025, and we will see you next time.